Martin Speake interviewing Norma Winstone on the 30th of May 2012. Hi Norma.
Hi Martin.
And the first question I always ask is, well, actually, when were you? What's your date of birth and when were you born?
23rd of September 1941. So I'm a war baby.
Okay.
And I was born in Bow,
Right.
East End of London, in St Andrew's Hospital, Bromley by Bow, which has in recent years been pulled down, but it was a real sort of Victorian-looking hospital. And my grandmother used to clean in it, I remember. But
okay.
besides, nothing to do with anything really, but
Well, it is to do with your life.
yeah.
What's your earliest memory of music? Was there music in the family?
There was in as much as my parents liked it. My dad, he played the piano. I mean, he couldn't read. He didn't really know anything about chords. But during the war, he was in the 8th Army. He was in the PBI, Poor Bloody Infantry, and he was a desert rat. And they had a band. They got together a band for sort of different time, I suppose, to cheer everybody up. So I used to play in that. I've got pictures of him.
He played what in that?
Piano. And we had a piano in the house because my grandmother had decided that she was going to buy one in, I don't know when, probably in the 30s or something. But I think, you see, at that time, East End families really did make their own entertainment. It's a bit of a cliche, but it's true. There was no television. Radio was a big thing. And I used to hear lots of music on the radio because my mum always had the radio on. And my dad wrote to my mum when he was, out in wherever he was, the front line or so, in the field anyway. And he'd heard Frank Sinatra on field radio. And he wrote to my mum saying, "You've got to hear this guy, he's fantastic." And so I was brought up with the idea that Sinatra was the god of singing, and he was. And as far as I'm concerned, actually still is. I think he's the best interpreter of a ballad, the best male interpreter of a ballad I've ever heard, really. I just think he convinces you absolutely. He was a good actor, I think, that's why. I don't know if he was a very good actor, but he's a good actor as a singer. You know what I mean, a singer-actor.
And you can remember him from very young,
yeah,
can you? What, in the 40s then?
Yes, I remember that the first music, I can't say there's a specific piece, but and it was difficult. I imagine during the war, I don't know what kind of stuff. It was Vera Lynn. Apparently I knew some Vera Lynn songs when I was about 2.5, 3. Used to sing one called "Yours Till the Stars Lose Their Glory." I mean, I don't remember it, but I think I spoke very early, and my mum's youngest brother lived in the house with us because it was just a rented house, with an outside loo, no bathroom, outside loo, in Bow, straight onto the street, no front garden. We had a bit of a backyard, and the loo out there, and my grandmother was renting it. Well, when my mum got married, she let her have the upstairs and gave her a rent book. It was sort of subletting, but so my mum could get on the council housing list. You had to be renting, and she didn't own up that this was anything to do with the woman downstairs, and it was her mother, because she wouldn't have got on the list.
Yeah.
And it's pathetic, really. But anyway, she was on it for 8 years. We did eventually get a council house in Dagenham when I was about 10. But anyway, but my uncle lived in the house with us. He was too young to go in to be conscripted until the very end of the war. And he just used to teach me words, I think. He used to think it was funny to get me to say complicated things. And whether he taught me words to songs, I don't know, but I learnt words to songs and apparently used to sing them when I was really young.
So was he a teenager then?
He must have been about 18, I suppose.
Right.
He was a bit too young just to be called up.
Yeah.
Until towards the end of the war. So I don't know how old he would have been. I don't know, and then, but all the time, you know, I used to get taken to see films. Obviously, when the war was over, there were lots of musicals and things like that. My mum always used to take me to see. I remember being taken to see Anchors Away because Sinatra was in that, Gene Kelly, but the one experience I really remember from when I was, I should say about 8, was she took me to see a film called Words and Music, which was, I don't know if there was a story to it, but it all seemed to be songs by Rodgers and Hart. And Perry Como was in it, I think. And then suddenly this apparition came onto the screen. It was Lena Horne in a red dress, and she sang The Lady is a Tramp. And it absolutely floored me. I couldn't get over it. When I came out of the cinema, I said to my mum, I want to sing that song. Can you get me the music?
How old would you have been
About
then?
8. And she got me the music. And when I was 7 and a half, thereabouts, I started to have some piano lessons. They asked me. I do remember sitting under a table and my dad saying to me, "Would you like to learn the piano?" And I said yes, I would. I didn't really know whether I would or not, but I knew they wanted me to. And so there was a woman who used to come round to the house, and for about 18 months I had piano lessons. And then, so, you know...
What did you do in the piano lessons? Was it a classical?
Oh yeah, I mean, there wasn't anything else in those days. I mean, you just learnt to read, learnt the scales and what the notes and the note values, you know, just learning about music and how to apply it to the piano.
Are you the only child?
No. My brother was 5 years younger than me. He came along when my dad came back from the war. I mean, he saw me when I was, I suppose, a few months old, and then he came. By the time he came, he was away. You know,
so was he away the whole time? The whole
4 years he was abroad and didn't come home. So I didn't know him when he came back. I can remember it very well. When a morning I got up and I went down to my grandmother's kitchen. And then she had a kitchen range, and my mum was frying some bacon and eggs and things, and there was this man sitting in a chair next to the kitchen range, and he was saying, come and sit on my lap. And no, I was cowering behind my mum's skirt, you know, I wouldn't go to him. Eventually he did get me. I just remember it clearly. I remember going and sitting on his lap, and then I think some cooking, the fat splashed out from the pan and landed on my hand, and so that was it, you know. I screamed and ran and left him. But then, you know, then my brother arrived, and he, you know, so it was a 5 years difference. There was just the two of us.
Yeah.
He unfortunately died about 7 years ago, and
what
we were very close. Well, he died of lung cancer, but before that he had a kind of dementia, which we don't know whether it was caused by the cancer or whether it really was a thing that, well, it wasn't. They thought it was Pick's disease, which is a horrible degenerative brain disease, which they don't know whether it is until after you've died, if they investigate your brain. And he left his brain, you know, to the National Hospital for investigation, but they said it wasn't Pick's disease, and I don't think they knew what it was really. Mm-hmm. But it was a horrible 5 years of. And then they discovered that he had lung cancer, and so he died in 2004. But and he was musical. No, but he was very musical. You know, I can remember him coming to. He liked more popular music, like he liked George Benson, and he liked more popular things than I did. But he'd ring me up and he'd say, "Oh, I've heard a song you should sing, Waters of March." You know, he was always on the lookout for songs, and he'd tell me, and often they'd be good songs to sing. And,
so you took his advice sometimes?
Sometimes I did, yeah. You know, he more or less introduced me to Joni Mitchell. I saw Joni Mitchell on the television at my mother's house one day, and I was absolutely knocked out with her. And I said to my brother, "Oh, I saw this Joni Mitchell. Oh, of course, I've got Ladies of the Canyon. He lent it to me, and I was hooked on her then.
Was that quite a while ago?
Oh yeah, that was 1969.
Oh, right, early on. The beginning of her career.
Yeah.
Okay.
But so there was music. There was a big focus on music. My parents liked all kinds of music. They liked the sort of, if you like, popular classics. They would go to Sadler's Wells. I mean, they had no money at all, but you could get really cheap seats if you queued. And my mum had a cousin who used to go from work and get a place in the queue, and then the others in the family would join her, and they'd see Tosca or La Traviata.
Did you go to those?
No, I didn't get. I was a bit young to take, and I do know that they went to the London Palladium to see Sinatra in the 50s when he was over, and I wasn't taken because it was all adults, and I remember really clearly feeling terrible that night, and knowing that they'd gone, and knowing that there were some people in the family that didn't like him that were going.
And you could have had the ticket.
I could have had the ticket, but I was too young. But and I remember my mum telling me she called out for Stella by Starlight. I thought, I don't know Stella by Starlight, but she didn't sing it. But he obviously had sung it. She must have heard him sing it.
Yeah.
But so she was really
quite
focused.
knowledgeable about standard songs that
And
you found.
and that's I think I wanted to sing. I knew that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to sing like that, like Sinatra and like Lena Horne. That's all I'd heard then.
You hadn't heard people improvising?
Well, I'd heard Fat Swallow, but I didn't need,
okay.
and I'd heard Oscar Peterson, but I didn't know what they were doing, but I loved it. I loved it. In fact, my dad loved Fat Swallow, and I remember, again, when I was about 8 or something like that, we were still living in Bow, and they used to go out to the pub sometimes on a Saturday night, and I remember being got up out of bed and carried downstairs to listen to some guy that they'd brought back from a pub who could play Fat Swallow's Alligator Crawl. So they actually got me up to hear that.
That's a great thing to do.
I know.
That's fantastic.
So it was just
a good musical education, isn't it?
Yeah, well, the thing is, my mum knew if I heard a song. The other great thing was, we had no record playing equipment, and nobody had any recording facilities then. I'm talking about late 40s and early 50s. Now, it hadn't come in then, cassette players and. Well, I did eventually get a 78 player, but then by that time I was about 12 or 13, I think. But we'd moved to Dagenham, we'd moved out to the country.
What was that like? What was
Dagenham.
The move like? Did you prefer the new place?
Well, I suppose so, yeah, because we actually had, some room. We had a sink, proper sink in the kitchen, and we had a bathroom, but we didn't have the running hot water. You had to boil it up in a boiler downstairs and pump it from the kitchen up. But at least, you could have a bath which didn't mean getting a tin bath out in front of the fire, which was what we used to do.
Yeah.
And I liked the new teacher that we had in the junior school. She was, it's another sort of great influence really, because...
You still at what age were you when you moved to Dagenham?
About 10.
Oh, so you're still in primary school?
Yeah. And I went to this school, and it was just all girls. And we had a teacher, and it was rather like the prime of Miss Jean Brodie, because we were her girls. It was just a state school, but she was quite a special kind of teacher, I think. And she played the piano. Well, I think she really paid attention to all of us, and you felt, that you actually were quite special. She did advise us. I remember, you might now be getting to the age of about 11, when you might start needing to think about personal freshness, It's like but anyway, I'd stopped having piano lessons before I left Bow because the teacher got pregnant, we had no means of going. I had no means of getting to where she lived, wherever it was, and she couldn't come anymore to teach me. And then we moved, so I'd had about 18 months of piano lessons, and then I didn't have a teacher. And when we moved, my grandmother said, "Take the piano. I'll give it to Norma. You know, she should have it." So we took the piano, so I would play it, you know, and practice pieces that I'd been learning. And it must have been obvious to the teacher at the new school that I was musical, because I remember we did a little play, and I knew all the parts. I wanted to act in it, but I didn't. You know, I wasn't allowed. She said, "No, you could do the singing part. You know, you're going to come on as a peddler and you'll sing." And I wanted to sing, but I really actually wanted to act, you know, at that point. But she obviously knew that I was musical and got me to sing. And at some point, the forms came round from the local council to apply for a junior exhibition to a college, music college. Well, I didn't pick one up to take it home, you know, for my parents. I just ignored it. And she said to me, "Why didn't you take a form?" And I said, "Well, I'm not learning. I haven't got a teacher." She said, "But you play the piano?" I said, "Well, yes, but I haven't got a teacher and I'm not learning now." She said, "Well, I think you should take the form and apply." And she said, "I'll coach you after school. Choose a piece and stay after school and I'll help you with it." So
Very
she
nice.
did. And I got through the first exam. I mean, I don't know how. But
What did you have to do?
well, you had to play a piece.
You know what it was? You know what pieces you played?
No. Oh, I think it was a simplified version of Chopin's Nocturne in E flat. Maybe it wasn't in E flat in the first place, but it was in E flat when I played it. You know, so it was an easy version.
Yeah.
And I had to sing something, and you know, they ask questions like they do, you know, a rhythm and.
Okay. So
Can
would
you
you
do
sing
this?
a classical piece?
I don't know what I sang really. No, I didn't sing a
standard
standard because
those
nobody.
days, would you?
No, but no, I don't think I
Exam.
sang for the first exam.
No.
Not for the first one, but that I had to answer questions about bits of theory and a bit about scales and because I had learnt that much, but I hadn't learnt much really in 18 months. I learnt how to play, you know, and how to read.
And what was this for? What was
Well,
the
this
junior
was
exhibition?
to get to a college, to have a day a week at,
Which college?
as it turned out, Trinity. Trinity College.
Did you go to Trinity for the exam? Or
Yeah, well, not the first one. The first one was at somewhere local. I don't know where it was, in the Dagenham Ilford area.
it's a local exam.
Well, I got through that and I found myself going up to Trinity College for the next one, or the final one.
So that was in Marylebone High Street, was it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
in Manfield Place.
Manville Press, yeah.
And I mean, I was just terrified. And I had to sing a piece for that. So she taught me a piece. It was I think something a scarecrow stood in a field one day. It just comes back to me. It was a little song, you know. And I suppose you can't say it was jazz. It would have been classical, if anything. But kind of songs that kids sing, I think. I don't know. But anyway, I had to take the music and somebody would accompany me to sing it there. And I got through that one. And I mean, nobody, I couldn't believe it. My parents were completely stunned because I'd not been having any lessons or anything. And at the same time, I took the 11 plus and I thought, there's no chance, you know. And I was a borderline case, apparently. So I had to go for an interview to Dagenham County High.
About whether you go to grammar school.
Yeah, or whether you get to secondary modern. And of course, interviewing I was no good at arithmetic or anything like that, but I was good at English. And of course, for interviews, what they did then, as I remember, was that you would read something, a passage, and then they'd take the book away and then they'd say, ask you questions about what you just read. And I don't remember much else, but I got through it and I found myself going to grammar school and Trinity College every Saturday. I used to go up on the train and spend the day. You know, I'd have perhaps a piano lesson. Sometimes it would be in Mandeville Place. Sometimes it would be at Dyneley Studios at the other end of Marylebone High Street.
I know where that was.
Yeah.
So you weren't paying for this? Was this
No,
scholarship?
Yeah, scholarship.
How long did you do that for?
Well, actually, I must have done it for about 3 years, I think. But I always felt that I was behind everybody else because I'd only had this brief period of lessons, and I felt as if everybody else must have had a lot more and knew a lot more theory. And we had musicianship classes, and I would never answer anything. I was always scared to let anybody know that I didn't know anything. But I obviously got away with it. You know, we used to do homework, and I'd sit at the piano and I'd write things that we had to do for homework. But they used to make you play at the end of every term, and that made me really scared. Playing in front of people, I was no good at.
But you did it?
Well, I had to do it, yeah, but in the end it freaked me out so much that I just said, I don't want to do it anymore. And I left and stopped playing. You weren't doing any singing? No.
On the Saturday?
No. I had to sing to get in, but...
You didn't do anything?
No, but I did a second study I took in the second year, and I could have done singing, but it didn't occur to me because I thought, well, the only kind of singing you can do is classical singing, and I didn't imagine myself doing that. So I took organ as a second study. But mainly that was because I was in love with Dudley Moore, who was in his last year at my grammar school. I was in my first year and he was in his last year, and he got an organ scholarship to Trinity.
Did you know him then, or was he just from afar?
From afar, you know. I worshipped him from afar. And so I thought, I'm going to learn the organ as well. He plays the organ, I'm going to learn it. And I did like the organ anyway. And so I used to, but that was another thing. I was practising at the church, the local church. And in the winter it was really scary. You'd go in there, it's all dark, and switch the lights on and run. You know, run to the lights, switch them all on. And then when you switch the organ on, you got this... and you're in the church on your own, and it was quite scary. But I did like the organ.
So it's all classical music you're playing?
Oh yeah, well there wasn't anything else you could do.
But you're still listening to Sinatra and who else? Other singers?
Well, by the time all this happened, I'd heard Ella Fitzgerald. Well, she had a hit with Every Time We Say Goodbye, and they used to play it every week on whatever it was, that programme, Family Favourites. Almost every week it was requested. Also, I remember Carmen McRae had a bit of a hit with Star Eyes, and I loved her voice. Also, Sarah Vaughan and Billy Eckstein had Passing Strangers. And anyway, but it was Ella that I heard first of the jazz singers, I think. And a cousin of mine had a record of hers. And I got I knew I had to get a record player. And I'd got a 78 player. And of course, the first thing I bought was a Sinatra 78 with one. And we'd all stand around it, play this one side and turn it over and play the other side. And anyway, very quickly, I think, sort of went on to... I got a player that could take LPs. And a cousin of mine had Ella, I forget what it was called, but she sang things like Flying Home on it, and Airmail Special, where she was scat singing.
So the first time you heard that kind of singing?
And I thought, wow, this is really good. And I learnt it, you know. I just played it so much that I could sing it. Yeah. And then, I don't know, also Radio Luxembourg. Every night when I was supposed to be doing my homework, I'd put the radio on quietly. The Goons also were on the, whatever it was, the home service, or the light programme as they called it then, I think. But I put Radio Luxembourg on, and every night they played a track of Ella and Louis. And I just fell in love with this, and I had to saved up, and I bought the LP. I've still got it. And I think by that time it was 1957, I think. Something like that. So I was 16 by then. And
did you leave school then?
I left school at 17. Because I was the oldest in the class. You know,
Because
I was the oldest. You know, my birthday's September, so it meant
right.
you know you're the sort of the oldest intake, because they take you from September round to August.
Yeah.
So you could have been almost a year different from somebody else in the class.
That's right. Yeah.
But anyway, I sort of bought this record, and then a friend of mine, her brother, had this Dave Brubeck, Jazz Impressions of the USA, and he was playing it when I was round there once, and I was knocked out with this. I didn't even know it was improvisation though, because Paul Desmond plays such clear lines that it didn't sound, well, I didn't know what jazz was anyway, but of course I did know. I understood it automatically. It didn't have to be explained what they were doing. But again, I learnt his solos because I loved them so much, and I used to sing along with the record. So I then bought it for myself. And it was the time it was Shelley Mann and his men playing My Fair Lady. That was another thing. It was almost hip to be seen walking about with these LPs under your arm, you know. Dave Brubeck, because he'd had a hit with Take 5, and you know, so it became Italian suits and college boy haircuts the boys had. It was funny, and winkle picker shoes, which I had too. But but then somebody, when I said I liked Dave Brubeck, he said, no. He said, you ought to listen to Thelonious Monk. And I joined this club where you paid money in every week, and when you had enough, you could order an LP, and they'd come out. There was this guy who had a list of all the latest releases, you know, from America, and so I got Thelonious Monk. Then I got Kind of Blue. Oh my God, that was it. When I got Kind of Blue, I thought, this is the music that I want to do.
Even though there wasn't a singer on it?
I just knew
how were you going to do it?
I don't know. I didn't know.
But you just felt connected.
I just thought, why can't a voice be in this group? Because the voices always just sing the song, and then everybody else does what I thought was the interesting thing, and then you sing the song again. Of course, I have revised my opinion about that, because I actually love singing songs, but at the time, I just thought, I don't know, I felt drawn to this music, and I just could imagine my voice in music like that. Probably because it was modal, it was easier. I mean, I had heard Charlie Parker. I think I bought a Charlie Parker LP, which I loved, but it was very complicated, the music, whereas listening to Miles, I mean, just the sound of Miles's instrument anyway, was like a voice, and he played few notes, and the chord sequences were fairly easy, really. I didn't know anything that they were modal. I just knew that they seemed easier than all the bebop sequences.
So you got that at the time it came out?
Well, I just knew, yeah. And I still got it.
You got these when they came out, these albums?
Yeah. And
what was the Thelonious Monk one? Do you know what
it was? I think it was called Thelonious Alone or something. It was just
Solo.
Solo.
Oh yeah.
And then later I got him with John Coltrane. But I think I can picture the sleeve, but I mean I haven't played it for such a long time. I don't know. He's on it with a sort of tweed cap he's wearing, but I can't think what it was called.
The Monk one?
Thelonious himself, I don't know.
I think that's it. Yeah, I think I know the one you mean.
Yeah, but
so were you still at home?
Oh yeah, I'm still at home. You didn't leave. My kind of background, you didn't leave home. You're obviously up to no good if you left home. I did try a few times. But,
so what happened when you left school then?
I just got a job.
What was that?
In a working for the Guardian Assurance. It's now Guardian Royal Exchange. In fact, I don't think it exists anymore. But it was Guardian Assurance in King William Street, right opposite London Bridge, and I was quite good at French at school, and so they got me a job in the overseas fire department, where we used to get correspondence in French, and some of the policies were in French, and you didn't really need, you could do it without, but anyway. And so I did this for a few years, then I left, but I didn't really know what to do, because I wanted to sing, but I didn't know how you went about it.
Were you doing any singing?
Well, the thing is, you see, from when I'd been, when I asked my mum to get me that music for Lady as a Tramp, there was a specific reason, because I wanted to sing it at the Christmas party, because we used to have these Christmas parties where families, all sort of branches of the family would descend on this house in Seven Kings, which was my grandmother's sister's house, and she had a daughter who was renting a house up the road, and then my aunt was renting a house in the next street. So there was enough. They farmed everybody out. People were sleeping on the floor and everything, in these three houses. But we all used to have our Christmas dinner. We had them in shifts. The men used to go to the British Legion for a drink, while the women and children had their Christmas lunch, and then we were finished and the men had come back, and then they'd have theirs. It was a very strange arrangement, really. But then we'd have carols in the afternoon. We'd sit, and my dad would bash out a few carols, and we'd sit and sing. And then the children had to do a turn, and you'd get half a crown, and which seemed a lot then. And you come in and you do. I remember I had a cousin who did a bit of ballet, another one who did a bit of tap dancing and sang, and if you did anything, you do it for everybody. And so I would work on pieces. I think, right, I'll do this at Christmas. And my mum's cousin used to collect the money from everybody for presents, and she got it. She was the one who used to go and get in the queue at Sadler's Wells, Auntie Queenie, and she used to get presents for everybody. So, and they'd be on the tree with the raffle ticket, and my uncle, my great aunt's husband would dress up as Father Christmas and come in, and we'd take a raffle ticket out, and then that present would come off the tree. This was all before we did our turn. Anyway, this cousin made me a black dress, like long sort of dress with a slit up the side and gold straps and a flower, like a sort of like shape. And then they'd say, "And now, ladies and gentlemen, straight from the London Palladium,"
Oh, brilliant. Great.
And then I'd come in and I'd sing, "I've wined and dined on mulligan stew and never asked for turkey." I hadn't the least idea what I was singing about, because we'd never had turkey. We had chicken, so because we had our own chickens, that we used to kill. We used to have them at the end of the garden, right. and a lot of people did then after the war. Kept their own chickens, and I remember helping my mum pluck them. That's before I got bird phobia. I wonder why I got a bird phobia, but anyway. So then I'd sing all these words. I didn't know what they were about, but I'd heard it. I'd heard a version of it, and I got the music, so I could learn it from the music, and I sang it. I just remember singing "Never at a Party." Alas, I missed the Beaux-Arts ball, and what is twice as sad, I was never at a party where they honoured Noel, and it's supposed to be coward, isn't it? But it's Noel, C-A''AD, because you're supposed to sing it, "Honoured Noel Card,"
Right.
But I thought it was Noel Cad. I didn't know. It was just so funny seeing all these words. I had no idea what they meant. I don't know what it meant. I won't go to crap games with barons and earls. I mean, I don't know what crap games were anyway. But anyway, I loved singing it. And another party piece was "If I Loved You" from Carousel, because a cousin of mine who was about 9 years older than me took me to see this show of Carousel, Rodgers and Hammerstein, and I can remember it really well.
I love that
seeing
song.
that "If I Loved You," yeah.
Great song.
There was also, which is a very adult song for somebody of that age. you know, 8 or 9. I mean, it's very, I don't know, I was just drawn to that music, and also to any classical music that had strange intervals I liked. And I can still...
You remember what
Well, I remember there was... Oh, I did like Prokofiev, you know, there was like Peter and the Wolf. There's very odd intervals in some of those pieces. But there was a Delius piece, and I always used to listen. It's called La Calinda, and it was quite popular. I only heard it on the radio. I've now got it, you know, on an old LP. But it had a line that went. I've chosen the wrong key, but la da 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 dee 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 da 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 da. You know, that fascinated me, and I had to learn it. You know, but you see, learning things meant you had to really focus, because they were there and gone. I didn't have a recording of them.
Oh, you got that from the radio?
Yeah, so every time I heard it, I think, oh, what's that bit? I must listen to that.
Great for the memory though, isn't it?
And it went on. It sort of resolved at that point, which was just so interesting. I had no idea what anything was about, but I was just drawn to things like that. I had to sing them. And to learn them, you really had to focus. It's like learning all the standards. Had to really focus on the words, and I'd learn 8 bars, and I think, right, the next time I hear that song, I'll learn the next 8 bars, and I'd say to my mum, do you know the words of the second bit of that? And sometimes she would, or often she would. So there was a lot of focus. And my mum sang. She used to sing at the Christmas parties as well. And her cousins sang, and they used to get a group together and call, you know, the Andrews Sisters, and sing "I'll Be With You" in Apple Blossom Time and "Buy Me a Bist of Shame." In fact, I got taken to see the Andrews Sisters.
What were they like? I don't know their music.
They were a wartime sort of singing group. I don't think they were sisters, no. But they had they'd sing the Boogie Woogie Bugle Boy of Company B. And it was kind of jazzy, you know, and just a close harmony, 3 singers, you know, and they were very popular. And I got taken to see them with my cousin to the Palladium on a matinee. Also got taken to see Judy Garland. I remember that very well. She was a bit plump, I think, then, which she never was. I've never seen her in anything when I've seen her. You know, she's always quite skinny, but she was plump at this time. I just remember her black dress and what she looked like, and so I was very lucky, really.
Yeah, a lot of influences there.
Yeah.
When did you start doing gigs?
Well, you see, when I didn't know what to do, how to get into singing, because there were no schools.
Did you know any musicians?
No.
No piano players?
No, I didn't know anybody, and I just knew that I wanted to do something, you know. And so somebody said to me, "Oh, look, there is a singing teacher at Seven Kings," and I thought, well, maybe I should go along and see what he's got to say. So I went along. I never ever heard him sing. I don't think he did sing, but I think he played saxophone, and he also played piano. And I went, and he said, "Right, breathe." And I went, you know, inflated the top half of the chest. And he went, no. And he just taught me how to breathe with the diaphragm, and gave me some exercise, long notes, which I've heard horn players practicing since. You know, at the time I didn't. I thought, well, I didn't have to do arpeggios or anything.
Voice.
Yeah, I didn't do arpeggios, anything, scales, nothing like that. But I did do long notes, and of course I didn't know any different. So I thought, well, I've got to. This is the only thing I know. So I practice it, and you know. And he said, well, you know, if you gave me little tips about how you make sure that you are breathing right. You know, lie flat and relax, and you find that, you know, when you breathe, your diaphragm goes out, up, and when you breathe out, it goes back down again. And that's what you have to replicate when you're in the standing position. Just if you forget and get confused, you know, which you do, people do. Because it doesn't feel natural when you first start to do it. Anyway, so that was that. And he gave me long notes. He told me how to take quick breaths, snatching breaths, and, you know, a few exercises for that. And then on those long notes you could practice vibrato or not. Well, I didn't use vibrato because I hated my vibrato, so I tried not to use it. But I realised later that I could practice it on long notes, you know, introducing it and then stopping it and introducing it again. I mean, I can't, it's a fantastic exercise. You take the breath in the correct way, make sure that, you know, the diaphragms come out and then you've sort of straightened up, filled up, and then sing an R, starting from your lowest note, and go all the way through your range. And of course you eventually come to, in my case, it used to be an A, it's now about G sharp A, my weak note, you know, where the break in my voice is, although nothing was ever mentioned about a break in the voice or transition. So I didn't know about that until I started teaching. It's terrible, isn't it? You learn from students about this break in the voice. I thought, oh yes, I know I've got a weak bit.
Well, a
in my
natural
voice.
break in every person's voice.
Yeah, there's a bit where you switch into head voice, they call it, from chest voice. Okay. Well, I don't know. People have heard me and said, oh yes, but what you've done is you've brought your head voice down rather than the chest voice up. But I don't know what I've done. I mean, if I have problems, and you do have different problems as the years go on with your voice, you get a different problem and things shift, you know, like the break shifts slightly. And I did go a few years ago to somebody who gave me some exercises to show me that actually I can sing those notes, but of course the way you get them is in the classical one. It's not the way I wanted to sound, but I can mix it a bit, you know, you experiment. And really most of my teaching has been self-teaching from this one teacher, Al Ducado, what's his name? Well, probably Al Duke. His daughter was Sandra Duke, she called herself, so I imagine that his name was Al Duke, but it was Al Ducado. I don't know where he came from. He looked as if he might be from Sri Lanka or somewhere, I don't know, maybe Goa, I don't know, but it was slightly dusky.
Yeah.
And every week he'd say to me, which song do you want to do this week? And so I'd choose a standard and he'd play it, and sometimes he would jot the chords out for me, which was really helpful. And so I started a list. We'd find the key that's right for me and I'd write it on the list. So I started to get a little gig list, and he knew people who had bands, and he got me a few gigs, my first gigs.
So this is different from the other teacher, the saxophone pianist?
No, it's the same one.
It's the same person?
I had the one.
Oh, so that's who you're talking about?
Yeah. He was,
okay.
As I say, I don't think, well, he managed to teach me to sing.
Did you have lessons with
I don't really know. It wasn't that long, maybe about 18 months, I don't know. If that, maybe 2 years, I don't know. No, it probably wasn't that long.
He got you some gigs?
He started to get me some gigs, but I didn't like them because they were function bands, and I'd heard jazz, you see, and one thing he said to me was, don't get too emotional when you sing, because it destroys the technique. Just, you know, you have to get the emotion in somehow without it affecting what you sing.
What do you think of that advice?
It's right. I think it's right. You know, I mean, of course, we all heard things that are affecting emotionally, like Billie Holiday, but she's. I don't know how emotionally affected she was. I mean, her voice sounds affecting because of the state that it was in, like towards the end, like Lady in Satin. And, I mean, I just burst into tears when I heard that first time. But no, I think you have to. Well, if you're emotional, really, your throat tightens up. Well, mine does. So I can't sing anyway. So not very well.
It's good advice, isn't
but
it?
you have to. Yeah, I think because singing to a certain extent is a bit like acting. If you're singing a song, I mean, I'm not when I'm improvising and singing in with instruments, then it's just making music. But when you're telling a story, you need to put yourself in the place of that person you're singing about. Which is why I think Sinatra was always so successful. Whatever you knew about him and his life, or you thought you did, it didn't matter. He started singing. You believed that he was vulnerable, or I did. It's very hard for a man to do that, to be vulnerable. I think, and still be masculine. It's a funny mix really with him. But so I started to get a few gigs, but it didn't last long because I was starting to put in bits of improvising or bits of changing the tune. I still kept the words. I didn't do wordless improvising, but people would say, "Well, where'd you get that from? Which record did you get that from?" And I said, "Oh, I just made it up." But I always had the feeling they didn't really like it, and it probably wasn't very good. But I was just finding my feet, trying to do something. But then I thought, no, if I've got to do this, I don't want to sing. If I've got to do this kind of thing. So I stopped. But I didn't stop thinking about singing, and I used to collect music. I'd go into shops, and I remember finding Lazy Afternoon, a copy of the music of Lazy Afternoon, which I'd only heard June Christie sing with Pete Rugolo, and big orchestra. And it was like gold dust, ran home with it, played it. It was great. And I remember I did take this job, which was awful. I don't know what, I was with somebody, we went for this audition. Somebody said, "Oh yeah, go for an audition, it's this work in Germany." And we went. Did you ever know Pat Higgs, trumpet player? You probably
know of him.
Yeah, well he was the trumpet player, and this guy I was with actually was married to for a bit, was on drums, and I was a singer, and there was a piano player called Al Shine, who was an enormous guy who anyway got all these gigs in Germany on American bases, and he offered me the gig, and I said I didn't want to do it, so I didn't go. But then I thought about it, and by this time I had yet another office job somewhere else, and for Boak Roberts, I think, a chemical company in Stratford, and I was living at Forest Gate at that point. And
you moved. Oh, you were married.
Yeah, I got married. I left home.
How old were you then when you
20.
got married?
20.
As a musician.
Yeah. Well,
You married a
yeah,
musician?
a drummer. Yeah. But
Who's that?
no, he's dead now. Long dead. His name was Ted Humphrey.
What happened with that relationship then?
It was never going to, it should never have happened really. It's just that...
Was it very brief then?
Well, 5 years.
Not that brief.
No, not that brief, but I think I was... I mean, I don't want to be horrible to his memory really, but I wanted to leave home, and it was really difficult. Even at that age, the idea of leaving home, you'd be thought not to be, you couldn't go and live with anyone, not at that time. It was,
No.
it was the time when if you got pregnant out of wedlock, it was still, still a great shame on you and your family. So I thought, well, this flat became available in Forest Gate that we knew about. He said, well, we could get married. So it was like that, So we got married. But it was never really going to be right, I don't think. But I just thought, well, I don't know what I was thinking, to be honest.
Why leaving home?
Yeah, it's awful, isn't it?
Well, no, it's not necessarily awful, is it? It's just of its time, isn't it?
Yeah, I suppose so. Because it's funny to think that my mother left my dad within that 5 years that I was married to this chap. My mum left my dad and went and lived with someone else. It became all right.
Yeah, that's
in the 60s, it became all right. And
oh yeah, that would have been the beginning of the 60s, wouldn't it?
Well, I got
61.
married in the beginning of 62. And by 67, I was doing, well, the thing is, I'd gone from this, I told you I was working in this office, and I took this job in Germany, which was awful, doing American bases.
So you did do it?
Yeah, I did in the end. After a month, I joined them.
Yeah.
And I had to sing downtown every night, and you know, Georgie Fame thing, that was a popular thing at the time. And we did some standards, and I liked Pat, actually, Pat Higgs, who was nice. And it was good and bad, really, but it was experience of performing in front of people, which I was very bad at. Well, I've never been any good at it anyway, you know. I mean, I'm too nervous. I was so nervous. But
so that was your first main gig?
You know, doing things like that, and then I did that, and well, no, actually, I did before I took this gig. And I was working in Stratford. I looked at the Melody Maker and I saw an advert for a jazz singer. And when there was nobody, there was one person about in the office, I used their phone, because I don't think I had a phone at the time, and I rang it up and I said, can I come and have an audition? Which I did, and actually got the job. It was one gig. And funny enough, since then I met the bass player with that group. Do you know there's a lady called Melody? Is it Melody? Well, you might know him. He's around. I think he has either Alzheimer's or something.
I know who you mean. Ian.
That's it, Ian.
Live in Potter's Bar.
Yeah. Well, it was Potter's Bar.
He's a bass player.
He was a bass player.
You're talking about then? You're talking about when you're 60s?
About 63, something like that, 63, 64.
Oh, wow.
And I rang and they said, well, you have to come to Potter's Bar to do an audition. And I remember it was snowing. I went on the train, I didn't know where I was going. But anyway, I sat outside and they auditioned a few people. And anyway, I got the gig, which turned out to be one gig, I think, somewhere in Surrey Quays. It was Surrey Docks. But so there was that going on. But there was a girl in the office when I was on the phone, and she said, oh, do you like jazz? I said, yes. She said, you should come to this pub where I go at the weekend in East Ham, the Black Lion, East Ham. There's a nice trio there. So I went down there, and they had a singer, a male singer, and I asked if I could sit in, and they reluctantly agreed, you know. And then at the end of the evening, they said, our singer's leaving in a couple of weeks' time, would you like the job? So I suddenly found I had 2 nights a week singing. You know, I was working during the day, but then I did leave that eventually to do this German thing.
So who was the trio?
Oh, I don't know, a guy called Bert Layton on piano. I mean, you wouldn't know Johnny. It was called the Johnny West Trio. I don't think he was a builder from East Ham or something. But
piano, bass, drums.
Yeah, piano, bass, drums.
And you singing songs.
Mm.
So you had quite a repertoire then?
Yeah, well, I mean, I knew all the standards. I didn't always have the music, but I knew which keys, and they often knew them, you know, could play them. And then I started, when I came back from Germany after doing this awful 3 months in Germany, these American bases, I just started to go around and ask if I could sit in at places, because there were lots of jazz pubs then. Well, lots. I mean, there was one called the Lilliput in Bermondsey, one called the Vulcan in West Ferry Road, Millwall, the Albert at Chingford. I think they were dotted about, you know, and they always had guest singers. And the idea was you'd go along and you'd sit in, and then if they liked you, they'd perhaps offer you a night.
So you were quite proactive in going around to sit
Oh
in.
yeah,
Even though you said you were quite nervous.
Oh, I was terribly nervous.
But you felt compelled
Had
to
to
do
do
it.
it. It was like a baptism of fire each time. I used to come up in a big blotches, on my neck and my arms, with fright. I used to run off into the toilet afterwards just to be on my own and calm down.
But when you sang,
Well,
you were okay.
I was nervous, but it gradually calmed down as I sang. But afterwards, I realised what I'd done, and then I had to run off. And I know it's hard to believe now because I managed to conquer it somehow by keep doing it, and that's all you can do. I think just keep putting yourself through it.
Yeah.
I've heard various advice from different people, like Jay Clayton. I remember saying, you have to think it's not about you, it's about the music. But you try and forget that it's you that everybody's looking at, and you can't. It's very difficult.
Tough one.
And of course, as a singer, you're out the front.
Completely naked.
And you haven't got any instrument to hide behind.
Exactly, yeah. Like the rest of us.
But anyway, so that was that phase, and I was doing one of these gigs, the Albert, I think at Chingford, and this pianist and drummer came along and said, could they sit in? It wasn't my gig. I said, well, ask whoever's gig it is. And it was John Taylor and a drummer called Dick Esmond, who runs the Sound of 17 out in Ealing. It's something to do with the Ealing Festival anyway.
So that would have been what year, roughly?
About 65, 64, 65 I think. By then as well, I'd been down to the... I was really into the jazz that was happening at that time. I used to go along. There was a little place called the the Downbeat Club in Old Compton Street. Johnny Scott used to play there, alto player.
Yes, that's from flute player. The alto flute player.
Alto and flute. And got to know him, but I remember telling him I wanted to be a singer, but I was never asked to sit in. Didn't dare. But I used to go to Ronnie's, the old place, and listen to Tubby Hayes and that Ronnie.
You did?
Yeah, and Stan Tracy, who I loved Stan Tracy's playing. And then the different Americans were coming over then. You got Dexter Gordon and different people came over, and singers. Betty Bennett, I remember, was a singer I heard down there. But I was just doing this sort of these pubs, and then I met John. Well, he came up and said, at the end of the evening, he said, if you ever want a piano player, here's my number. And I wrote it on a manuscript book, I remember, that I had my music in. And then I started to do a Friday night at the Lilliput in Bermondsey, and there was a singer called Bobby Breen who had a Tuesday night there. And I happened to see him. He was lovely, a West Indian singer. He used to sing with Dankworth, and Kenny Wheeler always loved Bobby as well. In fact, he did, first time I sang with Kenny's big band, it was me and Bobby Breen. He did an arrangement for Bobby of God Bless the Child, I think. Anyway, I happened to run into Bobby, and I said, I'm really getting fed up down at the Lilliput because you never know who's going to be on piano. And, it's a bit disheartening. You get down there sometimes and it's not anybody very good. Oh, he said, you should come on a Tuesday. He said, there's a ginger fella. Ginger, he wasn't really ginger. He was kind of blondish with hair. So he said, called John Taylor. I said, I've got his number somewhere. Anyway, I went down there and John was playing. And I think I'd just won a poll. Melody Maker, I'd come third or something. I don't know. I'd featured in this poll, Melody Maker poll.
So you were known.
Well, it seemed
stage.
that, yeah. Well, just people that went to jazz things, so they all voted, and probably they all did because they knew that they could. You didn't need many votes to affect the result. So,
so you get your family to vote.
Yeah, I didn't actually, but I had a lot of fans around at the Lilliput anyway. And John said to me, oh, he said, congratulations, some other people must have voted for you apart from me. And so I thought, wow. Anyway, then he suddenly got the gig 5 nights a week. which meant that he was playing on a Friday when I did it, and we immediately started rehearsing. I mean, nobody rehearsed for these things, but we did. We booked.
Duo?
No, piano, bass, drums. But I mean, we didn't always know who it was going to be. Sometimes Martin Drew would come down here because he knew John, and Dick Hammett, who's got that studio at Greenford.
Dick was playing.
Yeah,
He
Dick played bass. Yeah. Sometimes he'd come. But Dave Holland would come and sit in because Dave was in London. This was before he got the call to join Miles, and so it was a bit variable. Music, but John had discovered. Well, he'd been heavily into Oscar Peterson, and then he discovered Bill Evans, Denny Zeitlin as well. I remember he was very keen on when I first got to know him, and he was playing things like Elsa and the Bill Evans things. Tunes that Bill Evans played, and we just worked on things. We didn't do our own material at that point, but we just rehearsed standards. And anyway, then all in this time, I had been going to the Little Theatre Club in St Martin's Lane, where they had all new music. The Pine brothers, Chris and Mike Pine, were just down from up north. Ron Matheson had arrived from the Orkneys or Shetland Islands, and it was a kind of a meeting point. I
thought that place was completely improvised music. Did you say Little Theatre Club?
Little Theatre Club. Yeah, well,
was it all totally improvised, or did they
I don't know really. I mean, it may have been, it was a lot of totally improvised stuff. But you see, I had met John Stevens playing with a piano player that I'm not sure how I met him. Chris Goody. He was a Cambridge graduate, I think. And anyway, we used to rehearse together, and at home, or at a friend's house, we'd met, and he knew somebody. He knew Lionel Grigson, who at the time was married to a lady called Margaret Busby, and she used to write lyrics. She wrote lyrics to Naima, and she'd written lyrics to In Your Own Sweet Way, and Chris got these lyrics, Chris Goody, and said, "No, you could do some different things." So I sort of leapt on them because they were different songs to sing, not standards. And so anyway, he was playing at the Charlie Chester Club one night, so I went along and sat in. John Stevens was on drums. This is before he discovered free music, and he leapt off the drums and said, "Oh, this is fantastic! I'm going to tell Ronnie Scott about you." And he did. Apparently that night he went and said to Ronnie Scott, "There's somebody you've got to hear. I want you to give her an audition." And he said to me, "I'll get a group together." He rang me. He said, "I've asked Gordon Beck and Jeff Klein," and I was terrified because they were just names. They were stars.
But you'd heard of them?
Yeah, I'd seen them down at Ronnie's, the old place, playing, and I'd never spoken to them. And he said, "No, it's all right." He said, "We're going to meet at Gordon's house in Hounslow on Saturday. Get to Hounslow and then ring him up and he'll pick you up." And I remember I got on the train, and I thought, from Forest Gate or wherever I was, Upton Park. And I thought, well, Hounslow East, Hounslow Central, Hounslow West. Well, I don't know. So
too many stations.
So I just thought, well, if I go to Hounslow Central, I've got to be in the middle anyway. So I went to Hounslow Central, and because I didn't know Gordon, when I rang him, "Hello, Norma Winstone." "Oh yeah." So I said, he said, "Where are you?" So I said, "Hounslow Central." "Oh, wrong one." Gordon. And so he came and picked me. He said, "No, stay there, it's all right. I'll pick you up." And he did. And we rehearsed a few tunes, and it was lovely, sort of playing with them. And waited and waited for the audition, and nothing happened. In the meantime, John discovered free music and didn't play time anymore. That was it. Finished. So he started asking me to go along to these gigs he was doing we formed the Spontaneous Music Ensemble and asked me to do some things with them. So, and I met Kenny doing some of these things.
Was that the little theatre club then?
Well, we used to rehearse. I don't know where it was. Somewhere all over the place.
So it wasn't gigs. You just
just got together and
totally
played.
improvised.
Yeah.
What year? No idea.
Again, you see, this must have been about 65. Because I got my first gig at Ronnie's November 66. Now, in the end, I waited so long and I kept ringing and they'd say, oh yeah, we'll come up with an audition like next week.
You kept ringing Ronnie?
Ronnie's, yeah, to say, I'm this person that John Stevens talked about. Finally, Ronnie, I thought, I've got to do something. Can't miss this opportunity. So I went in there. I don't think I could do it now, but at the time I was desperate and I went in. And I went up to Ronnie, who I didn't know at all, and just said, do you not want English singers in your club? Because they'd moved by then. They'd moved from the old place to Frith Street, and it was half the size that it is now. And anyway, that's irrelevant. But so I went up and said, don't you want English singers in your club? And he looked at me and said, well, why? Why'd you say that? I said, well, you've never had an English singer in your club, and you promised an audition. You promised me an audition through John Stevens, and I've waited 8 months and I still can't get an audition. So I thought perhaps you don't want to have English singers. I said, can I sit in tonight? Stan Tracy was playing. He said, no. I said, well, I'd love to sing with Stan. And he said, no, he's not the right piano player for you. I said, but you don't know, you've never heard me. So he said, no, I tell you what. He said, sit down, listen to Blossom. Blossom was on. I promise you, I'll sort out an audition for you. And he did, the next week. But by that time, John Stevens wasn't involved because he was playing, he wouldn't play time. So Gordon organised, he said, don't worry, he said, Jeff will do it. He said, and I've got this drummer who's just come down from up north. It was Tony Oxley. So
he was playing time.
He was playing time then. Fantastic time as well.
Yeah.
My God, what a player, a time player he was. So they did my audition. And Ronnie said, okay, I'll give you 4 weeks. And he came up with the 4 weeks, because they used to do that. They'd book people for a month then. 4 weeks opposite Roland Kirk, who was playing with Johnny Birch, Dave Green and Phil Seaman on drums. So, it was a fantastic time. I was scared stiff, so I don't really remember much about it. By the time the date came round, Jeff had gone to America. Tony had disappeared. I don't know where Tony had gone, maybe for Germany or somewhere. And although he was back in England again, and I did play with him after that. So we finished up playing with Alan Ganley and Ken Baldock and Gordon Beck. And Alan was so helpful. Alan Ganley, so lovely. Helpful with arrangement ideas and things. Because I had no arrangements, I just...
You said a song.
I remember buying 4 arrangements off Gordon at the end of it. I just thought I ought to do that really. But he was scary, Gordon, because you never knew. Well, you didn't always know whether he was going to be in a good mood. And I was so inexperienced, I didn't really know quite how to deal with it. But it was wonderful, a wonderful experience. 4 weeks there.
Won't happen now, would it? Anywhere?
No.
That was an amazing time.
It was.
What year?
That was November 1966. Well, by that time I was playing with John at the Lilliput and doing other gigs with him. But because I'd done the audition with Gordon, obviously he was going to do the gig. And anyway, I loved Gordon's playing.
Gordon did the whole time? Whole month?
Yeah, he did the whole month.
The same band did the whole month?
Yeah. And that was great. And I just thought, oh wow, this is it. I'm on my way now. But I still hadn't had a broadcast, and I still couldn't get one until about the next April. I managed to get on the radio. But even having done a month at Ronnie Scott's didn't qualify you for a gig with the BBC.
Can you remember what the money was? The salary at Ronnie's?
Well, I think it was £30 a week. £30 a week, yeah.
That's actually quite a lot, isn't it?
Well, it wasn't. It seemed a lot to me. I don't know what I was earning in my job. Can't remember, but I didn't care anyway about the money. The fact that I was doing it. I was at Ronnie Scott's. It was incredible, and playing with these musicians. That was the thing. Great, And
did you listen to? Did you enjoy Roland Kirk?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, and he was very nice to me actually, very encouraging. It was difficult because he couldn't see me, so I'd have to go up to him and say hi. And when he was back there again, I went in to see him, and I went up and just said hello. I think he hadn't become Rassan then, but I remember sitting. He said, "I come and." I sat next to him, and he said, "I've been looking out for your recordings." He said, "I've been looking in the shops." He said, "There aren't any." I said, "No, I'm afraid there aren't. There weren't any recordings at the time." And then I did get on some recordings. I don't know.
What was your first recording?
Actual recording was Hum Dono with Amancio da Silva, Joe Harriott, Dave Green, Brian Spring, and Ian Carr.
That's available now as a CD.
I think it was reissued. I think so. Became a bit of a cult thing, for a while.
So
not so long ago.
What year was that?
I don't know. It was all around. Yeah, before Ronnie's.
Mid-60s.
I think so. I think it was. Yeah, I don't know. It was all a bit of a blur really, because after that I did some recordings with Michael Garrick. I joined his band. I don't know when that was. 68, 69, I think.
Were you with the Amancio da Silva? Was that wordless?
Yeah.
The whole thing.
Yeah. So I must have. Oh, this is what I don't understand. It
So,
was
yeah,
before
how did they
Michael's.
Book
It
you
was.
for doing something like that?
Well, you see, I met Ian Carr. This is another sort of. Sorry, I'm going on a long time.
No, I'm just worried about the battery on there. But I think we're right.
With this drummer that I'd been married to, we started up a club. That must have been about 64. I don't know, something like that. At the Regency Club in Hackney. I found out later it was owned by the Cray twins, but we used to run a club there once a week. The barman was quite friendly towards us, and he said we could do it. He'd seen us at the Lilliput, I think, or he'd seen me at the Lilliput, or somewhere, at one of these pubs anyway. So we ran this club, and we used to book a guest every week. I remember we booked Ray Worley, and I remember also we booked Ian Carr. And of course we'd play and I'd sing. And Ian said to me, "You should sing with the New Jazz Orchestra," which I'd only heard about, He said, "I'll introduce you to Neil Ardley," which was wonderful. He was always so encouraging, Ian. I loved him. And he took me to meet Neil Ardley. And I started to sing with them. I went and listened, and I sang on some of the arrangements. They'd got an arrangement of Buzzard's Song, which didn't have a voice part, I think, but anyway, I learnt the words and I sang it, and a la Gil Evans' Porgy and Bess album. So that was, things were happening in parallel. It's really difficult to remember the order of things, but obviously the Regency Club, that would have been. It must have been about 64 or 5 or something like that.
And when you were singing there, that was all standards?
Yes, all standards.
And were you scatting on them?
Well, I used to sing a different melody with the words, as far as I know. I don't really remember scatting
not
much.
without words.
No, but you see, through the New Jazz Orchestra, I met Michael Garrick. He was on piano with the NJ when I joined them, and he gave me some songs that he'd written. He'd written the words and everything, so it was really funny singing them, because I had no shall we say, no models in my head. I'd never heard anyone sing them. They were completely new songs. So I went along to one of his gigs, and he said, have you learnt any of the songs? I said, yeah. He said, do you want to sing one then? So I got up and I sang one of his songs, and then he said, don't stay on the stand. He said, join in the next piece, which was something like a one scale thing in 10, probably Temple Dancer or something. Had no words anyway. And I just did an improvised solo, as I remember. I don't remember having sung without words before. Maybe I did, but this I remember was a new step, because at the end of the gig he said, would you like to join the band and sing saxophone lines? Because he said that he had two saxophones. He had Jim Phillip and Art Thiemann and Ian Carr was front line. And he said, Jim's leaving. So I took over and sang Jim's saxophone parts. So, of course, I was singing without words then. And I really loved it. I thought, wow, this is... In a way, you see, it was all going back to that thing that was in my mind when I heard Kind of Blue. I mean, I didn't realise it wasn't, oh, well, I've decided I'm going to do this, and these are all the steps towards it. It's just somehow it happened, because I suppose I was ready to do it. And then Ian left and Henry joined, Henry Lowther, and I think Coleridge Good was on bass when I first joined, and then he left and Dave took over, and it was Dave Trevor. Dave Green, Trevor Tompkins, Art Thiemann, Henry Lowther, myself and Michael.
And this is all Michael's music?
All Michael's music, yeah. And but it was, one thing I found that was interesting was that when I sang these words, I mean, they were English words written by an English person, it was English music, I couldn't sing with an American accent.
Oh, so he wrote words?
Michael wrote, he did,
Some of the things were wordless, but some did have words.
A lot of them were wordless, but some had words, because he was very interested in words. He loved poetry. And he would set poems sometimes.
Okay.
And write his own words. But when I sang his words, I found afterwards, when I sang a standard, when I got to a word that might have been sung with an American accent before, like dance, or, you know, whatever, where you get that A, you know, that could be R or air.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it could be air if you come from up north, probably, but I mean, I didn't, and so I would have sung dance, except I'd been influenced by all the Americans I'd heard, so I think I sang more with an American accent, as a lot of singers do, you know, because our role models were American. But I hesitated, because I thought, this is not me, is it? If I sing this. You know, it...
How did that affect your singing standards?
Well, I think it did affect it. They became more English. And
in pronunciation?
In pronunciation, yeah.
That's fascinating, isn't it?
Because I suddenly realised it. I didn't realise what an effect it had on me, singing music I'd never heard anybody else sing before, and English words, which, well, why would I sing with an American accent?
Was there anybody else who'd done that? Had a similar...
Cleo, I would imagine, singing Shakespeare. But Cleo always sang with an English accent.
When she sang American songs, standards?
I think she did, yeah. Yeah. Though I hadn't really thought about... No, I don't think... I mean, I liked her, but she had such a different sort of voice from me. But it's only... By the time she was doing the Shakespeare things, I think I was already doing the Michael Garrick things. And then I joined Mike Westbrook, because people started to ask me to do things. Once I was with Michael... I think other people thought, I could use that, her singing wordlessly.
You're quite unique, aren't you, at that time? Well, you still are now, but...
Well, I suppose I was.
There wasn't anybody else in your
Not that I
area?
knew. Not that I
In
knew.
England?
Not in England. There probably were in America. Well, there were. I know. I've met people since who were working on the same lines, like Jay Clayton. More experimental, even.
But you didn't have any vocalists as influences
No.
at that time?
No.
In that way?
My influences in that way were instrumentalists. And
Who did you like at that time? Do you remember?
well, I loved Miles. I loved John Coltrane. Didn't matter about the instrument. It was just the music, really. And I don't know. I just loved the jazz that I heard, the American jazz, you know. And of course, I loved Ronnie Scott's playing actually, and Wayne Tubby's. And Gordon's. Yeah, I liked all the English. Well, I just liked jazz, really.
You went to music. You went to gigs.
Oh yeah, I went to gigs.
Instrumentalists.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, I wasn't that interested in singers, although I would hear them in the Americans if they came over. But I just felt that I had. I mean, when I think about it, it was the arrogance of youth. I thought, oh no, I don't want to do that, you know. That's being the singer at the front, you know, and singing, and then they all do the improvising, then I sing the song again. You know, don't want to do that. But, you know, Kenny asked me to do some things with his big band, which I loved because I loved his music, you know, anyway. You know,
This is in the 60s?
Yeah.
You already heard it?
No, yes, I'd heard it in the 60s. I heard Windmill Tilter, about 68, I think.
Yeah, isn't it?
Yeah. And got that and played it to death. But I hadn't met him then. Did finally meet him. And they're doing the... Yeah, I don't know really. It's all a bit of a blur because I might have met somebody then not see them for years or something and then meet them again and it's just difficult to remember. But eventually he did ask me to sing things with his big band, and in fact in 72, 3 we did Song for Someone.
Yeah.
We had Alan Branscombe and John on electric pianos. Great music, actually.
Yeah, I like that. That's Tony Oxley, isn't it?
Tony Oxley.
Ron Matheson on that? Or can't remember. Was it?
I think it was Ron.
I think it's Ron.
Yeah, it is Ron.
And then there's a mixture of some improvised players.
Yeah.
Evan Parker and Derek Bailey are on it, bits of it, aren't they?
Yeah. And Mike Osborne was on it. Duncan Lamont. It's a smaller sort of band, really. It wasn't like the big band that he had later.
I like the way he mixes the players up from different areas.
Yeah, it's great. And of course, everything just went. I met John, and then we became involved, you know, and eventually got married. And of course, we both were working with Kenny. Well, I won a Melody Maker poll. Actually won in I think it was 1971, and I think I'd already recorded with Michael on Argo, which was a branch of Decca. He had some link with Argo, and they obviously thought, well, God, she's already on our label somewhere. We better give her a record. So they gave me a recording, which I did, which came out on Argo, got Edge of Time, and because all that I just used a lot of the musicians, all my friends, you know, that I knew at the time. It was Malcolm Griffiths, Paul Rutherford, Mike Osborne was on it, Art, John Kenny, Chris Lawrence.
Is that after the Kenny's one, Song for Someone?
No, it was before. Yeah, before Song for Someone.
That's out on CD as well, is it?
It was. A Spanish label put it out. Now, there's another Spanish label now who wants to put it out as an LP again, because LPs are fashionable again.
Okay. So the CD's gone now?
I don't know, I imagine so,
What is it,
yeah.
Fresh Sounds or Which
It was
label?
Disconform.
Okay.
I mean, I've probably got a copy if you want it
Yeah.
at some point. Yeah.
I can remember when I probably was at that time, I was a teenager, I loved all that music, British music, and I can remember getting that out of a library.
Really?
Yeah, they had them in libraries.
Yeah, I know.
British jazz. It's amazing.
Yeah.
But I can't actually remember the album at all now.
No.
Can you?
Yeah, well, I can, because obviously I've had to think about it because they wanted to put it out again. I mean, I didn't. At a time when I thought, well, the voice wasn't recorded very well, and I just didn't think didn't really like the way I was singing. In fact, I didn't like the way I was singing at all until I recorded for ECM. And I heard myself recorded well and made to sound nice. And I thought, wow, I can actually sound like this. And after that, I tried to sound like that when I sang live.
So it's more the recording quality, though?
Yes.
How they recorded your voice rather
yes.
than your actual singing?
Well, yeah, although I think the singing's a little bit, well, I don't know. I was still learning how to be a voice in amongst a lot of instruments.
What's music was it on that album? Was that your music?
Yeah, well, there were some of my words, there was some of John's pieces. There was a piece by John Sermon, a piece by John Warren, a piece by Mike Taylor. Neil Ardley arranged one of Mike Taylor's tunes called Song of Love. Yeah, and then they were mostly, well, if there were any words, they were generally mine, I think, on John's music or Kenny's. Did we do Kenny's? I don't know if we did anything of Kenny's. It was mostly John's, I think. And then, of course, later, Azimuth was formed because there was this little explosion for a while of English companies putting out CDs and people having their own companies and putting them out. I think Decca realised their mistake and deleted it sort of after not very long. And then there seemed to be no opportunities for recording at all. And we'd heard some ECM things. And so John had a list of record companies and he made appointments to go and see people. And he and I went into a studio and did a duo recording. And the night before he went, he just bought a Synthi AKS, I think it was. It's, synthesizer. And John Sermon had said to him, put something unusual on there if you're going to see Manfred. And I think the night before he went, he said, I've set up this loop on this synthesizer, stuck a microphone in there and said, just improvise over that. So I did that, and he took that with him. And actually when Manfred heard that, Manfred Eicher, he said, I can hear a flugel with the voice. Why don't you do something with Kenny as well? So Azimuth was born because of that. Really, that was 1977.
77. Oh, he knew
It was
Kenny.
the first.
Kenny
He
was
knew
already
Kenny
label.
had done New High
High
with Keith Jarrett, and Kenny had wanted to use John, but Manfred said he didn't know John, but of course he knew of John through Kenny. But he said, no, I think you should do it with Keith Jarrett, which was, of course, absolutely the right thing to do. So, and that, but I never have thought of my voice, as being like an instrument. For me, it's the voice is an instrument. It's a sound. And I can't see why you can't use a voice as a sound. There are various problems in using it, like with amplification and making it balance and everything. But really, it's a sound. It's not, because people say, which instrument do you think about when you sing? But I've never thought of an instrument. I've always thought, this is the sound. And I think of more the instruments that I'm singing with when I'm singing with instruments. So, kind of got there really. I think I'm doing in the last, it's been about the last 20 years or so, or even more and longer. actually what I hoped I would do. I didn't know what it was, but I think this is what I've been doing. Is what I was hoping to do all those years ago when I bought Kind of Blue.
Yeah. So the first Azimuth one was 77.
We did 5.
Pardon?
We did 5 of them altogether, 5 albums.
Getting an appointment with Manfred Eicher wouldn't happen now. That was quite a special time at the beginning of that label, wasn't it?
Yes.
The 70s.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's quite a good relationship you have with him to do 5 Azimuth albums.
Yes.
And obviously John's done some other things, and
Kenny's did a lot, But that group did 5. Yeah. One with Ralph Towner as a guest, the 3rd one.
Did you tour much with that band?
Well, we toured. I mean, more than you would now, I think. But it was a different sort of time, But it never really, in this country, I don't think critics knew what it was about, really. To be honest, they didn't. I remember Richard Williams saying it was the most, delicately conceived of all chamber jazz groups. We had some nice quotes, but generally I think it was a bit ahead of its time, probably. Yeah. Now it would be good, probably, but...
Well, it's probably influenced a lot of people of now, hasn't it?
Well, I think it has, because people are always saying, everywhere I go, people mention it, even young musicians, they've been introduced to it by somebody else. Older musicians have said, you've got to listen to this. And because it was very unusual in its time, voice, keyboards and trumpet.
Yeah.
Probably not unusual in classical music, but in jazz it was not. But it was all just a discovery, really. Nothing to go on, really, just making the music. And the music, some people would probably say, is that jazz? I can only say, well, we're all from jazz backgrounds, but
it's irrelevant, isn't it?
It's irrelevant to me, yeah, but people do say that. I don't know if it's jazz.
Well, a lot of people do want to pigeonhole.
Yeah.
Unfortunately. So I just realised during that time you must have given up your day job. Maybe I can't remember whether you said that.
Oh no, I stopped working during the day when I did Ronnie's because I couldn't do it.
You gave up the job, or just
but I went back again to not that job. I went back and did temporary work because I had to.
Yeah.
It wasn't the turning point I thought it might have been, but so I still had to work. But then eventually I did. By about 69, I think I did stop, and I thought, right, I'll see if I can just make a living just singing, which I could then, because I was in various bands.
And then with ECM, you did things under your own name as well, and you have done it recently. But was the first one?
That was Somewhere Called Home. Yeah. Yeah.
Did you suggest that to?
Yeah, I think it was. I wanted to do something, but I didn't really quite know. I wanted to do some standards because I did like singing standards. Because when I'd had a sort of rest from them, then I sort of went back and things had changed a bit. I think I changed the way I sang a bit from having sung with instruments. And so I rang Manfred and I said, look, I've got this idea about doing an album. I said, but I think you might not be interested in it. I said, so I just want your backing to offer it to somebody else.
That's a good approach, isn't it?
And he went, why don't you think I would like it then? So I said, well, there's 1 or 2 standards that I want to do. Well, we can do that. So I said, well, maybe we could have a guest on different tracks, different guests. And he said, well, who are you thinking of? And so I reeled off a list of people, and Tony Coe was one of them. And at Tony Coe it stopped. He said, I want to record Tony Coe. Let's do an album, you and John and Tony Coe.
So he knew Tony?
He'd heard Tony and he wanted to record him. Yeah, he heard his clarinet playing. I think he loved his clarinet playing, and so that's how that came about. I mean, I wasn't sort of trying to push him by saying I'm going to take it somewhere else, but I just thought, well, if I'm going to, he won't be interested. I thought, if I'm going to do it with someone else, I just want him to know that I'm doing it, you know. But it actually was probably quite a good move, really.
It's interesting that you put that to him, because you didn't have any albums out with your own name anyway on that label.
No.
But you felt you could say that to him.
Yeah, I just felt I should, really.
Because you were part of the label, really, because of the Azimuth.
Yeah.
Had you done any others apart from Azimuth?
No. Yeah, Fluid Russell. I don't know if I did that then.
Was that Ava Weber?
Yeah, and and then of course the ones with Kent, the song music for large and small ensembles. That's all really. So I'd only done the Azimuth ones.
But you'd say that, which you said earlier, that's where your sound and your voice is heard at its best in terms of recording.
Yeah.
And how
I
you
think
want to
so.
sound.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
You record for other labels, don't you?
Yeah, well, I have recorded for just odd things, like when I did in the sort of fallow period when I couldn't get anywhere. You know, I couldn't get anything that interested him. I started putting out things on my own label, you know, just things that catching up with, like documenting things really, like.
What's your label then?
Enodoc. It's I did some things with. I did a duo with John called Like Song Like Weather.
Oh yeah, I know that.
I did a thing with Steve Gray, the late Steve Gray, Chris Lawrence, and some tracks with Tony Coe called Manhattan in the Rain. Well Kept Secret, well that came out, that's what I did with Jimmy Rolls, who I paid for myself. Jimmy Rolls, George Mraz and Joe LaBarbera. That came through writing lyrics. You know, I wrote the lyrics to The Peacocks, which became A Timeless Place, and that's another long story, but you know, I finished up recording that with Jimmy himself.
Who's the composer of that?
Jimmy Rolls,
yeah.
And so
that's on your label as well?
Well, it is now. It came out on Mole Jazz to begin with. Then it was out on Koch Jazz in America, and then nothing, and Mole Jazz went under, and I just thought, well, maybe I should just put it out again so it's still available. And of course it's kind of things that, I don't know, people buy. They like the standards. Over here, that's a lot of people. Yeah. And because I did one with Stan Tracy, Amoroso, only more so, a double CD, which I just did myself, paid for myself, because I wanted to sing with Stan. Yeah, and I thought I'd like to hear him play some standards, you know. I know he always plays Monk and Ellington, well, he plays his own stuff. And we did one or two of his tunes and standards.
Oh, so that was all your idea?
But it's not on my label, it's on Andy Kleindert's label. What's it called? Trio, yeah. But I paid for it.
I didn't realise you. So you are, what I said earlier, you're actually quite a proactive person, really, aren't you?
I suppose so.
You
like
get things happening.
It looks like it when I look back over the years. I don't feel as if I am. No, but I don't feel as if I'm proactive.
But you
Hugh helps though. Hugh is a bit of a driver. You know.
Well, he suggested those things.
And he said, you could do that. I don't know if he suggested Manhattan in the Rain but I think the Stan one. You know, I said I'd like to sing with Stan. He said, well, why don't you just ask him then?
So you never had at all sung with Stan?
I did once on a thing called Willpower. Stan wrote this piece called Alas, Dear Lady, and it was Shakespeare's 400th anniversary. We did this thing from Southwark Cathedral. It was kind of organised by Sam Wanamaker to celebrate this, anniversary of Shakespeare. And we did it in Southwark Cathedral. Mike Gibbs wrote a piece, Stan wrote a piece, and I sort of was the soloist on that. And Neil Ardley and Ian Carr, and there were all sorts of musicians on it. John was on it. Gordon, Tony. Can't really remember.
So that's quite a while ago now.
Oh yes, yeah. Whenever, I don't know when that was. It would have been
70s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that was the only time I'd really sung with Stan.
But you'd always.
I'd always
because you
admired.
mentioned when you.
Yeah, when
in
I
the
used to see him.
60s, you liked.
Yes, yeah. I remember my parents liked Stan as well. I remember them.
So he was known, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was.
British
Yeah.
jazz.
Yeah.
Okay, so did that work out okay? Did the album you did with him recently?
Yeah, it was. It did. I mean, and it's it's a people think of it as along the lines of well kept secret. And I remember someone saying, the older jazz fan who said, he said, there's that wonderful thing you did with Jimmy Rolls. He said, and I thought, well, she won't do another one like that. He said, and then you did. You did. Well, we recorded one lot of songs, and then I thought I hadn't got that thing I wanted. Stan, this kind of the slow. I wanted. There were elements that I don't think I'd got when we did the first recording, so I just found another load of tunes, ballads, and so we've got one which is sort of the medium and faster things, and then the second album. It's a double album, but the second one is, we do a poem which we just improvise. But Stan says he plays like Starless and Bible Black, really. And it was with Bobby as well. So, who's playing I Love, Bobby Williams.
Yeah, me too. I'm going to interview him soon.
Yeah.
Right. So is it with Clark and
Clark
Andy?
and Andy. Andy engineered it.
Why did you put it on his label, not your own? Just a matter of interest.
I don't know. Because I thought that he had a better mechanism, He was putting albums out and he'd put others of Stan out, and I just thought it would fit in better somehow. And he said, I think you'd probably do better if you pay for it and just take any of the profits. I don't know if there have been any, but we almost made a profit and then we had to reissue another lot. So
it's on another printing?
Yeah. So the potential profits went down the drain. Well, I don't know if they're still there. I suppose I've not checked up. I don't know. It was just good to do it,
Have you got any other plans? Any other projects you want?
No, not at the moment. I can't. Just want to record again with the trio, with the ECM trio.
Which is with who?
Glauco Venier, piano player from Italy, and Klaus Gesing, who's saxophone player from Germany.
Yeah. And you've done two for ECM. Yeah. But you're going to do another one?
Well, yeah, I hope so.
I think so.
I hope so.
Whenever it gets round to it.
We're working on it at the moment. So. Well, I don't know. No, I think he wants to. He's just so busy. It's hard to get hold of him.
Yeah, I'll try to basically. Not possible.
No.
Should we finish?
It's time for you. You've got to teach, haven't you?
No, a bit later.
Right.
I fancy lunch, actually. So, but that's really great, Norma. Thanks for sharing all that.
Took the hind leg off a donkey.
That's fantastic.
It's so difficult because there is such a lot. There is lots of strands, and I don't know. I don't know if I've left anything out. I shouldn't think so with all that. But.
No, you remembered the incredible amount of the early period in your life.
Yeah.
It's really totally fascinating for me because I probably know a bit more, and probably other people know a bit more about more recent.
Yes, of course.
Things, you're more visible and you're on ECM. But we haven't really talked about the last 20 years.
No.
But if we need to, if I want to, maybe I'll ask you another time.
Yeah,
we can
more of the
something.
same. More of the same, really.
That was really great. So thanks very much.
Good. I enjoyed it.